there is the entire Roman government. Now we are ready to continue our story. Sorry, that took way longer than I thought. Okay, so continuing our story now, King Tarquin has just been driven out of the city of Rome with his family. Roman Republican government is set up, poof, comes into existence, evolves over time. The first thing that happens is Brutus and Collatinus are elected as our consuls. So they're now the heads of state. Collatinus, remind you, he was the husband of Lucretia. Brutus, his good friend. Two leaders in overthrowing the kingship. Now, they basically have the kingship powers divided amongst them. Two consuls, they alternate fasces. So this is fasces right here. And this is a sign that you are currently in power. And what would actually happen is they would alternate holding fasces to show which consul was in charge at which month. Since Brutus got the most votes the first month, he held fasces. And that's what holding fasces mean. Let you know that he is the one in charge. Yes, a bunch of wooden sticks together with an axe in times of war or when you were out leading a military. Your 12 lictors would also have these sticks that they would haul around, and those were literally for beating people. Remember that they're largely your police force. So we got our sticks here symbolizing how we treat our fellow citizens when they misbehave, and we got our axe here for how we treat our enemies when they misbehave. So Roman consuls, each one has 12 lictors that follow around to kind of enforce their will, and they alternate fasces, showing which of them is currently in charge. So the king's powers are largely split between the two consuls, and then the Rex Seclorum, the one who's subjected to the Pontifex Maximus to make sure, since he has some of the king's powers, he's got to come under someone. We don't want a king's powers to be too powerful. And so that's how the king's powers are largely seen as being divided early on. And hopefully that all makes sense with how we just explained the whole Roman government so far. Okay, so first thing, now Brutus, holding fasces, one of the first things he does as consul is he gets people to take an oath that they will never suffer a king to rule in Rome again. And so this is an oath that all the Roman people take. While their emotions are still high, they just surround the kings. Everyone's outraged by what happened to Lucretia. With that, he hurries up and he fills up the Senate back to 300 members. Remember, Tarquin was letting the Senate die out and intentionally killing some of them. Tarquin wanted the Senate to ultimately die off, and it would just become a kingship, no Senate. So one of the things he does quickly is replenishes the Senate back to their 300 members that they initially had. Rome's going to have 300 senators for the next few hundred years. Now, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, this same Collatinus right here, just write out his whole name. Notice that he has that Tarquinius in it. He is, I can't remember exactly what it is, but he's like a nephew of King Tarquin, or something like that. He's related to him. So after Rome gets her powers, then Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, Lucretia's husband, the people become suspicious of him. They don't like that there is a Tarquin as a consul of Rome. This guy's related to the king. The Tarquins have proven that they cannot be trusted with this type of power. So they are very uneasy about having him there, and there starts being talk amongst the people that they want him to step down from the consulship. Now it's possible that this happens after what we're going to cover on the next slide, after some conspiracy where Tarquin tries to come back to power, and that made the people suspicious, or they were suspicious from the beginning just because of his name. But either way, the people are suspicious of him. And so Brutus calls a meeting together with the entire assembly and with his co-consul right there, Collatinus. And he explains to the people all the great things that Collatinus has done for them in the name of liberty. And Brutus turns to Collatinus and he says, "And now will you do one more favor for Rome? They are very worried that you're going to become a king. We need you to make one more sacrifice for Rome and to step down as consul and to leave the city." And so Collatinus, he's a little bit resistant at first, but he ends up agreeing to do this. So he steps down from his consulship of his own free will, takes his possessions, and he's able to leave the city, and he moves to a city, Lavinium, so another Latin city. But he actually leaves the city, and they end up deciding that they want all the Tarquins out of Rome. Now, all the Tarquins out of Rome might come after the Tarquin Conspiracy, so have to wait a second there. And after he steps down, Publius Valerius, another one of those four guys, he was the friend of the father, he's the one that's elected to replace him. We're going to see all four of those guys are consuls at some point. Good so far? Okay, so Collatinus has stepped down. And now we've got Publius Valerius replacing him. Now, after King Tarquin is taken out of power, a bunch of the young nobles, they start complaining about the king being gone. And their complaints go along these lines. They talk about how a king, he can listen to you. You can sympathize with the king. When you do something wrong, you can explain to the king why you did that wrong and how you're actually on his side. They complain how laws are blind and deaf. They don't care who the person is. They can't tell friend from foe in the city. They don't like being subject to these law things. Right. They don't like being subject to these law things, where it doesn't matter if you're a patrician or it doesn't matter if you're wealthy. Everyone's subject to these laws. So they very much resent that they're now subject to laws rather than kings. Kings know their friends and they know their enemies. And they know, oh, it's not a big deal. He's really on my side. It's hard, I think a direct quote of Livy is they discovered it's hard to live by integrity alone. Anyways, so a bunch of the nobles who had it very nice under the kings that could abuse their powers because they're connected with the royal family, they're now finding out that they have to follow the laws. They don't like that. They like the life that they had under Tarquin. Now Tarquin, he's driven out of the city, but one of the things he does is he sends some ambassadors to the city to ask for his possessions. So sends a couple of ambassadors to say, hey, we're just here to get the king's belongings, and then we're going to take them and be on our way. Now, the Senate is torn what to do about this. On the one hand, if we don't give the king his belongings and we keep them, that gives him a pretense for attacking us. And it also is a way for him to go and get sympathy amongst other people, saying that we were so petty to him, not only did we drive him out, we wouldn't even give him his possessions. On the other hand, they're afraid if they give him the possessions, then he'll just use that to help fund a war against them. Basically go buy mercenaries or whatever with the money. So they're debating, what should we do with the king's possessions? Should we honor these ambassadors' requests or not? Now this was all a ploy. The ambassadors weren't really there to ask for the king's possessions. That was just to get him in the city and distract the senators, give them something to argue about. What they were really there to do is to talk to the disgruntled nobles in the city and go find the people who were happier under the Tarquins and try and convince them that wouldn't things be better if the Tarquins were back in power? You kind of had it nice, didn't you? And so they get a bunch of them to agree to open the city gates at night. So that's what they agreed to do. And they distribute letters from King Tarquin himself explaining exactly what the conspiracy is, what the plan is. And so some of these nobles who agreed to do this, prior to the event taking place, they're just talking about it as they're meeting together, as young nobles do. And the slave happens to overhear them. And the slave also knows about the letters. When they actually get the letters from King Tarquin explaining exactly what the plan is, that's when the slave decides to go to the Senate and tell the Senate about this conspiracy. And so the consuls are able to hurry up, go get their lectors, basically arrest the guys, see that they do in fact have these letters, and this was in fact a plan, and now they're going to punish these guys. Now, two of these young nobles were Brutus's sons. His own sons were caught up in the conspiracy. And so there was a question about what should we do with the conspirators? And some people were in favor of just exiling them from the city. Brutus put his foot down and says, no, we're going to give them the death sentence. And so he sentenced his own kids as part of the conspirators to death. The question was also, what should we do with these ambassadors who came here under this pretense? And they decided that you have to let them go. You have to honor international law. While they came here under false pretense, you still can't go around killing ambassadors. So they let the ambassadors go. They don't let them take any of the king's possessions, but they let the ambassadors go. And they kill all the nobles that were going to help out in this conspiracy. Now the question comes up, what should we do with the king's possessions? Because we're obviously now at this point not going to hand it back to him. Are we going to keep them for ourselves? What should we do with them? What they decide to do is put the king's possessions out to the public and let the public come and take whatever they want, essentially. And so now it's the public who robbed Tarquin. And so now in the minds of all the people, if Tarquin comes back, he might be kind of mad at you for taking his favorite chair or whatever it was. And so now all the people are culpable. And so it drastically, in the Senate's mind, decreases the chances of any of them deciding that they're going to...
More conspiracies.
give away to conspiracy and think we'd have it good if the Tarquins came back to power. So trying to put an end to that. So that's what they decide to do with the king's possessions. Now this slave who brought the whole conspiracy to light, when they discover that it was in fact a conspiracy, they free the slave, they grant him Roman citizenship, and then they grant him a good amount of wealth to take care of himself from there on out. So he was very well rewarded by the state for bringing this to their attention. We're going to know that's a common thing the Romans do. You help them, they're going to be generous with you. Very much rewarded for serving the state.
Which is another incentive to
to
report conspiracies
Yes.
if they did show up.
And
Right.
also just support them in any way.
Now you nobles, you got to watch out for what your slaves are saying about you.
Yeah.
Got to be careful what your wine server says while you're drinking. Or what your wine server hears while you're drinking. Okay, so now Tarquin, he's in trouble. He was hoping with just a few bodyguards, the gate would be open to him, bring the bodyguards in, quickly kill your rivals and take control of the state again, kind of like he did from his dad. Now, obviously, that plan's not going to work. He's not going to just get entrance into the city of Rome. So plan A didn't work. On to plan B. What's plan B going to be? If you can't get it with having them open the gates to you, you got to get an army somehow. So now he's got to get an army. And who are the great enemies of the Romans? The Etruscans. So he's going to run to the Etruscans to get help. So, pleased to the Etruscans for their support. Ultimately, he's looking for an army. In particular, two cities are willing to hear him out. First off, the city of Veii, because
They already ate him.
there's already been a bunch of bad blood between these Romans. Going all the way back to this slide. This land right here used to belong to Veii. Fidene used to belong to Veii. Rome has been winning a lot of victories against Veii. Very much been abusing them for a long time now. So that's one of the cities that instantly jumps on board at giving Tarquin an army. Veei's thinking, finally we get a Roman general. Let's see how you guys like it. Okay, and then the other one is Tarquinia. Tarquinia, where the Tarquins are ultimately from. They're going to be the ones that agree to us. On the map, it's right here. It's just named different. So both very southern Etruscan cities. Anyways, so Tarquin convinces Veii and Tarquinia to supply him with troops, each of them supplying him with an army that he's going to lead and reconquer Rome. And he gives a big explanation. I want to give you a taste for some of his convincing. Give you a taste for Livy and what this book actually reads like. Livy, it's a very entertaining book to read. So I'll give you a taste for some of it. So what is Tarquin saying to these people to convince him to give him an army? He's saying that they should not suffer him, sprung from themselves. Remember, he's an Etruscan. He's ultimately from Tarquinia. Of the same blood, exiled and in want. They didn't give him his possessions. Lately in possession of so great a kingdom, to perish before their eyes, with the young men his sons. That others have been invited to Rome from foreign lands to the throne. Right? They had taken in the Sabines, for example. That he, a king, extending the Roman Empire by his arms, was driven out by those nearest to him. Understand that Collatinus was like his nephew or whatever. So driven out by those nearest to him by some villainous conspiracy, that they had by violence divided the parts among themselves, because of no one individual among them was deemed sufficiently deserving of the kingdom. If the Romans themselves recognized that no one is as great as me to be their king, they had to divide my position up into 3 different guys. Right? So even they recognize how great I must be. And so, put me back into power, and on top of that, now Rome will be an Etruscan city, and we'll be part of the Etruscans. And you guys won't have to worry about this constant contending with Rome down here in the south. They can join Etruria. So it's a very tempting offer, and so they supply him with the 2 armies, and now he's going to go march on Rome, and he's going to retake Rome. That's the plan. Now, the Battle of Silva here, so 509 BC, same year that the Republic is set up. This all happens pretty quick. What ends up happening in this battle? So you have the 2 armies. These guys, let's see. These guys are going to be from the Tarquins. These guys are going to be from Veii. And then these guys are your cavalry. Those are the Etruscan guys coming down. And then down here you have just your Roman armies. Sorry, X is for infantry, and then if it just has a line through it, that's for cavalry. So here's roughly what their armies look like. What ends up happening is Brutus, leading the Roman cavalry, gets to the battlefield first. What's his name? He's one of his sons. Arnis, thank you. Arnis, one of the sons of King Tarquin, is leading the other cavalry. They are the first ones to get to the battlefield before the infantry can even get up there. Once they see each other, they just charge at each other in a rage. They are furious at each other. And so charging at each other, furious at each other in a rage, they kill each other. Both give each other fatal wounds. And so they get the fighting going on before anyone else can even get there. Can't wait. The infantry end up getting up there, and they start fighting. The Romans are winning on the right side, and they're losing on the left side. And the way Veii puts it is something along the lines of that the Venetians had become accustomed to losing to the Romans and quickly gave ground. And the Tarquinians, who didn't know any better, pushed, and they were doing good against the Romans. And so it is a very furious fight. There's a lot of fighting and killing going on both sides, and it's very evenly matched. At the end of the day, so night falls, they decide to separate, go to their separate camps. These guys had lost an important person, Brutus, one of the consuls. These guys had lost one of the king's sons. And they go to their separate camps for the night. And while they're in their separate camps, this battle happened to happen right next to what are called the Arsia wood. So that's a forest that's over here to the right. Whatever, some forest. And the god, Silvanus, who's the god of like the countryside or whatever, in the middle of the night, he calls out from the forest. And what does he say to these guys? He says that more of the Etrurians by one had fallen in the battle. That the Roman was victorious in the war. So even though it was evenly matched, the gods declared that the Romans killed one more than the Etruscans did. And so Rome won the day. They were the winners of the battle. So say the gods.
The Etruscans agreed.
Well, what ends up happening is the Etruscans from Tarquins and Veii, it was a very hard-fought battle. They didn't get the decisive victory that they were hoping for. And they realized this just is not worth it. We're not going to continue fighting like this, running ourselves down, ultimately to give someone else a city. And so after that one battle, they decide we're not going to get our decisive victory. They actually up and leave in the night. And so since they can make a nighttime retreat, they can't take all their supplies with them. And so at their camp, they're actually forced to leave a good amount of supplies behind. And so the Romans are actually able to loot their camp and plunder it. So not only is it a hard-fought battle, but the Romans are the only ones who actually gain anything from the battle. The rest of them just lost. And so with that, Veii and Tarquinia, they give up the war. Publius Valerius, the sole consul now, collected the spoils, and he goes back and he has a triumph. And on top of the triumph, they have this great, big, fancy funeral for Brutus, the consul who died. Brutus, he's basically seen as the father of the Republic, like our version of George Washington, so to speak. So that's how he's viewed by these guys. And so it's decided that they're going to have a year of mourning for the death of Brutus. In practice, I don't know how this is carried out. Probably some practice similar to us, like flying flags at half-mast. They have their equivalent for a year to honor the death of Brutus. So that's what ends up happening with the first battle there. So Tarquin's first plan A didn't work, plan B didn't work. We'll get to his plan C here in a bit. In the meantime, what happens with Publius Valerius? On one hand, so our sole consul now, Publius Valerius. On one hand, people are suspicious that he didn't quickly appoint another consul to take the place of his companion, who died. So he's the sole consul right now. So people are getting a little bit nervous about that. And there's some hill in Rome, and he decides to build his house on a hill, a very normal thing to do. Build your house on top of the hill. Him building the house on top of the hill, Romans are becoming suspicious that he's trying to build a fort inside of Rome from which he can function as a tyrant inside the city and take control of the city. And so these types of rumors start spreading. And this just infuriates Publius Valerius, because they already kind of got rid of Collatinus just to humor the people, even though Collatinus hadn't really done anything wrong. They had just fought this great battle under which Brutus died. I mean, these four guys have given so much for the Republic, and here they're still dealing with this. Oh, we're putting a house on a hill. So what does he do? He calls the assembly together, and first off, he goes off listing his achievements and how lucky it is for Brutus that Brutus was the one who got to die. He says, Brutus got to die amongst you a hero. Had he lived any longer, you would have accused him of trying to somehow become a tyrant. Will I ever get away from this suspicion? Will you guys ever stop wondering how I'm trying to take over the city? How I'm trying to take over the city? Give you one of his direct quotes. Is my integrity so slightly founded that it makes more matter where I may be than what I may be? Haven't my actions already spoken loud enough? But he's so annoyed with these guys who don't want to build on the hill. He says, fine, not only will I come off the hill and build here, I will go find some low spot in the city I can find, and I will build my house all the way down there, so that you can all dwell above the citizen you suspect. And let those who are a better friend to liberty than Publius Valerius be the one to dwell on the hill. So that's what he says to him in assembly, kind of guilt-trip them a bit. And he goes on to do two more things. He says that we're going to pass these two other laws. The first law we're going to do is that if anyone tries to set themselves up as a king, you can kill them. And now you have a legal protection. So legally, you can kill anyone trying to set themselves up as a king. The other thing he does, and the more important thing he does, is he gives the assembly the power of veto. Now, a tribune of the plebe doesn't exist yet, but a tribune of the plebe, when they come into existence, they basically have all the power of the assembly in one person, that power of veto. So here's where it initially comes into existence. So now the assembly, together, can veto any particular action. Someone tries to find that person guilty of something, the assembly can veto it. You try to pass a law that they view as hurtful to their liberty, the assembly can veto it. So he gives the assembly the power of veto.
Is that the tribunal assembly or the centurion?
I think at this time it's going to be the centurion one. But regardless, keep in mind, even though that is split up by wealth, vast majority of it lies with the plebeians. The patricians have a very small portion of that vote. Okay, and so that's what he ends up doing. Oh, I forgot to say, when he meets with the assembly, the first thing he does when he addresses them is he lowers his fasces to him. And what that symbolizes is he's recognizing that while he is the highest, most powerful magistrate in Rome, the assembly is always greater than any individual person. So that then becomes a common practice when you address the assembly, you lower your fasces. Is respect for the assembly, respect for Rome over the individual, so to speak. Okay, so that's what he does there. Any other questions before we continue with Tarquin? Is that a 7 or a 1?
1.
Okay, I think we can get through Porsena. All right, so now we are on to plan C for Tarquin. He tried taking the city with conspiracy, that didn't work out for him. He tried getting some Etruscan armies, that didn't work out for him. So now he's going to run off all the way to, it's going to be labeled different on here. Clusium's the name of the city. Clevson is what's labeled on this map. Clevson. So that's going to be the next city he runs to try and get support to try and retake Rome. Oh, in the meantime, Lucretius was elected the next consul. Remember how Brutus died? Yeah. So Lucretius, the last of the 4 members who started this whole rebellion, he was elected the next consul, but he was super old at this point, and he dies a few days later just from natural causes, and then some other guy replaces him. But the point is, all 4 of them were at some point consuls. Go ahead.
Do you know why a lot of the names that we have on the map and the names in the book are different?
Partly because cities change names with time, partly because these maps are coming from different languages.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then, yeah, just the names of things change with time, unfortunately. So
Yeah, Roma.
it's always a mess trying to hunt down. When I come up a city, I read the city, I gotta figure out which stupid city it is. Figure out where it exists at. So that's always got a problem. Anyways, so Tarquin, he now runs up here to Clusium. Clusium is seen at this time as the Etruscan city. It is to the Etruscans what Athens becomes to the Greeks, kind of. It's the hot shot, it's the big city. And Porsena, Lars Porsena, he is very well known by everyone as both a great leader and a great general. In terms of who is the greatest man in northern Italy at the time, it's Lars Porsena. Big deal. So that's who Tarquin runs to next. So Tarquin convinces Porsena, the king of Clusium, to go to war against Rome. And he gives a bunch of the same appeals that he gave to the other guys. Let's appoint an Etruscan. It'll be better to expand the Etruscan influence. But on top of that, he offers up a new one to Porsena. He says, we have got to stop this spread of liberty that is going on with these Romans. This kingship is this regal form of government. It is the most supreme form of government, kingships. The gods themselves use it. Jupiter is king of the gods. These blasphemous Romans are trying to spread this evil type of government. And kings have to be ready to fight for their power as readily as these people are willing to fight for their liberty. We've got to come out with the same ferocity. And they are some fierce people down there. We've got to stop this spread. So that's the extra piece that he adds on in trying to get Porsena to go to war against the Romans.
You couldn't tell he was the bad guy. Goodness.
Just doesn't give up.
You'll probably like Porsena.
When he
By the
became a guy, they're the bad guys.
That's always how you.
Okay. So Rome knows that this is happening. They are panicked. Porsena, big shot. They don't want to go to war with Porsena. So first thing they got to do is Rome starts gathering food like crazy. They know that Porsena is eventually going to come. He's going to siege the city. We're going to need plenty of food. So first thing they're doing is buying up as much food as they can, supplying it, getting ready for what they know siege is coming. The other thing that they do is they take control of the salt mines. So the salt mines, initially, public or private citizens could go and use the salt mines and sell the salt for their own private business how they wanted. They basically end up nationalizing that business, so to speak, and using all the funds to go towards the Senate or go towards the Republic, and then use that to buy up food as part of preparing for the siege. Now, that's not going to be enough money. They need much more money than just that to pay for everything that they need for this upcoming siege to help prepare. They know they're going to need a lot of wealth. And so what the Senate ends up doing is passing a law, but they only tax the extremely wealthy to pay for the siege. And so it's just the very wealthy people who are going to be ending up paying for all these different things. Now understand, this is the senators basically saying, who's going to pay for this war? We're passing a law that says we're going to be the ones paying for this war. And so the Senate reaches an all-time high in approval rating amongst the people. The people very much recognize how much of the war burden the Senate themselves are taking on in preparation for this war. And of course, the reason that the Senate is doing that is the people are already panicked. Porsena is coming. If we were to tax these people, that would push them to breaking point. And they would just open the city to Porsena and let him in and let the Tarquins take power. That's how terrified they are of him. So they figure they have to front the entire financial burden of the war that's coming. Otherwise, the people will flip. And so in that way, they win a bunch of the approval of the people, and the people are now as determined to keep Porsena out as the senators themselves. So it works.
Sovereign kingship seems way more difficult than I imagine.
Huh?
The whole kingship culture shift is way more challenging than you would think.
Takes a lot to change 250 years of how things were done.
Yeah.
Understand, Rome was a kingship longer than the United States has existed.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. And so Porsena, they know that he is ultimately going to march on Rome. Now, the Janiculum, this is a zoom in on Rome with the 7 hills with the wall going around the city of Rome. Unfortunately, they didn't mark the Janiculum on here, but it's a hill right here. And the Romans had a fortress up on top of this hill to act as a lookout. And they have a bridge built across, a permanent bridge to the city of Rome. And so Porsena, he marches the army down there, but he shows up way faster than anyone expected him to. And so he's able to kind of show up and take the Janiculum without even putting up a fight from the Romans. So he comes, he takes the Janiculum, takes his fort up here. The Romans panic, quickly start running across the bridge into the city of Rome. Now, if Porsena's army just follows them right into Rome, he's going to get Rome without them even putting up a fight. So Rome is in a very dangerous position. Porsena gets a very early win with the Janiculum, and it looks like the war is over before it even starts. Now, Herodias Cocles, or however you say his last name, but Herodias, this absolute madman, he's one of these soldiers in the Janiculum. As he's running across the bridge, he's telling his fellow soldiers, if they come across this bridge, they'll be on the Palatine as quickly as they were on the Janiculum hill here. We're in trouble. So he tells them to keep running across the bridge and to cut it down. And he single-handedly, 2 other guys initially, but they fall back. So basically him single-handedly turns on the bridge to face the entire army of Porsena coming after him. Now, if you are in an army and you're running along and you see one guy on a bridge turn around to stand and fight you, what are you going to think?
He knows something.
It's got to be a trap, right? We're falling for something. And maybe we didn't just get an early jump on them. Maybe there's a plan here that we're not seeing. And so they're kind of stunned by the fact that it's just him. Now he starts mocking them and challenging any of them to single combat who dares face him. He's just trying to stall for time. He annoys them bad enough that a bunch of them all just throw their javelins or whatever they have at him. And miraculously, with his shield, he's able to block all of them. And this kind of stuns him. It's kind of as impressive as you're watching a basketball game and you watch someone from half court just sink that shot, buzzer beater. Just something impressive like, did that just happen? And so they're kind of stunned long enough, and he's able to hold them off long enough that the guys who went across the bridge are able to cut it down and it collapses. And it's the collapsing of the bridge that makes them realize, oh crap, we just fell for this. And so with that, when the bridge collapses, then they continue their charge at him. He offers a quick prayer up to the god of the Tigris, and then jumps into the river fully armed. Very bad plan. It works. He's able to swim across, armor and all, get across the river. He lives.
Wow. With armor?
Yes. And so this guy, he's one of the heroes of Rome. I think he's ultimately like deified or whatever next to Romulus. One of their big heroes. When it's realized what he has done... Oh, go ahead.
Are there theories and stuff that he was connected to deity as well?
No.
No?
He swam
It's
across
more
the
like
river.
he's probably... I'm
Like
honestly
a
not
grandson
sure.
of Mars or something.
It's too brief a mention. So I don't know the histories that Levi had when he was putting together the story of this guy. So no idea.
Swimming with a baggy shirt. So.
But yeah, he at least had the support of the god of Tigris. So he's able to swim across. The people of Rome are so appreciative of him that pretty much everyone gives him a little something as a reward. Hands him just a little bit of money. On top of that, when the war's all said and done, he's told that he can go, I think it's on this side of the Tiber, and as much land as he can plow around in one day, he can have as his farm. That's his reward from the state. But so he gets a nice reward for being absolutely nuts. Anyways, so that very much frustrates Porsena's plan. So now Porsena has no choice but to set up a siege around Rome now. And kind of try and starve them out or come up with some way to get inside the city. So he encamps on the Janiculum. This is where Porsena is going to be set up now. And he starts setting up patrols all the way up and down the river. Now, even though Rome has been preparing this entire time for Porsena, they still want access to these lands to get forage for whatever food, stuff like that they can. They currently have all their cattle inside the city, but their cattle also needs to get out and be able to eat, be able to graze, stuff like that. And so they're in a very tough position as Porsena starts sending raiding parties all around the city to stop them from being able to use any of the outside land. So the consul at the time, he comes up with the plan. He sets up orders at sometime early in the morning or whatever it is, that they're going to let all the cows out of some back gate as far away from Porsena as they could possibly get. Let them out early, get them outside the city, take them far enough away that they can graze or whatever, and then bring them back at some other time. So that's what he tells them. So Porsena, thinking that this is a good time to score some resources from the Romans, he sends a decent chunk of his army, like a 20th of it or whatever, all the way over to set up, ready to raid them when they come. Well, the consuls were ready for this. One consul army was waiting somewhere like right here, off the board, and then another consul army was waiting by a different Roman gate over here. So Porsena's men, they're waiting to ambush some guys as they're supposedly bringing out cows. While they're waiting to do that, a small group of Romans comes charging down off the hill that these guys can easily take. That draws them into conflict. That's when the consular army that was hiding over here comes out and they realize, oh crap, we're way outnumbered. They try booking it over. That's when the consular army that was waiting by the gate here comes out to stop them from crossing the river. And so Porsena loses a good chunk of his army trying to raid the surrounding lands. With that, Porsena decides it's not worth it to try setting up these raiding parties. And so after that, Rome's able to use the surrounding lands, which for Porsena just means a longer siege. And this is going to be dragged out even longer. Very frustrating for him. So, there he is, him besieging the city, and that introduces us to another one of our absolutely crazy guys. Gaius Mucius, I think is how you say it. Gaius Mucius. He is some hot-headed Roman youth. And he says, this is absolutely ridiculous. Never did we sit here and hide behind our walls in all the time that we were ruled by kings. And now that we're ruled by ourselves and we have our freedom, we're going to sit here and hide behind walls from an army? He says, I'm going to deal with Porsena myself. Now he goes and he tells the Romans that he's going to deal with Porsena himself because he's about to leave the city. He doesn't want them to think he's a coward and that he somehow died fleeing the city or something like that. So if I die, know that I was going after Porsena. Don't want to be viewed as a coward. He sneaks out of the city, puts on some Etruscan clothes, swims across the Tiber, sneaks into the Etruscan camp, and when he shows up there, it turns out it's payday amongst the soldiers. So he's standing there with the rest of the soldiers dressed up like an Etruscan, getting ready to get paid as the king and his secretaries come by. The problem, he has no clue what Porsena looks like. It's not like you can Google a picture of the guy. Which one's the king? And the king and his secretaries all look the same. And so they come walking along, and as it's his turn, he takes a guess and he stabs a guy. Turns out, he killed the secretary. But the king then captures him and takes him into the whatever tent and starts questioning him about what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. And Porsena, or not Porsena, Gaius Mucius, the madman, he tells him, there is a great plan to have you killed, Porsena. And I was just one of many people who were going to do this. And it's a foolproof plan, you're basically already dead. And Porsena says, I'll get you to tell me about the plan. And he threateningly starts building a fire next to him. And he says, I'll have you tell me everything that there is to know about this plan. And so, Gaius Mucius, as he sees that fire burning, he walks over and he sticks his right hand right in the fire and lets it burn to the point where it's completely destroyed. And he says, you're not going to burn, you're not going to torture any information out of me. And Porsena, he is just shocked. He's like, if you were on my side, I would have nothing but praise for your valor. Now, as you have done far more harm to yourself than you did to me, I'm going to let you go. On top of that, his right hand's now crippled, and so he's not much of a threat militarily speaking. He says, so I'm going to let you go.
Wow.
And so Gaius Mucius, he tells him, well, since you show me this kindness, I'll pay you back the kindness. And I'll give you something to me that you could have never tortured out of me, but since you're being nice, I'll be nice. And I'll tell you what the plan is to kill you. He's making this up. There is no plan.
Yeah.
What is the plan? He tells him. He says that 300 of us young youths all took an oath that we would each take our turn coming and trying to assassinate you just like I just did. And I am just the first of 300 that will come. So you still have 299 other guys who are going to try and sneak into this camp, pulling straws one at a time, trying to sneak into this camp one at a time, trying to kill you. And eventually it's going to work. Well, Porsena, he's thinking, this was actually pretty close to working. It's just because he didn't know what my face looked like that I'm still alive now, didn't get stabbed. So that very much makes an impression on Porsena. And so Porsena, after that event, decides to go and meet with Rome and come up with peace terms, put an end to the siege. Because this is going to be a drawn-out siege, and he doesn't want to wait for 299 other crazy guys who are willing to be burned to death come and try and assassinate him. So he comes up with peace terms with the Romans, and the peace terms that they agree to is, one, Rome will give up all of these lands. So all the land basically north of the Tiber, they will give up back to the Etruscans. And two, that they have to hand over a bunch of hostages. And the idea there being is, if you misbehave, we kill the hostages. And so it entices you to follow whatever the treaty is. And Rome ends up agreeing to this treaty. So, Gaius Mucius, once again, he gets another great reward from the Roman Senate. He might have been the one that got the farm based off of how much land he could plow. I don't know. One of them did. But two great heroes. All right. Sorry, I know I'm dragging on, but let me finish up the slide. Clolia, whatever her name is. Clolia now, she is one of the girls who is handed over to Porsena as a hostage. She gathers up all the virgins with her, all the young girls, all the virgins, and they make an escape for it. And so they sneak out of the camp, they cross the Tiber River, and they sneak back into Rome. Porsena, he is absolutely outraged by this, some of his hostages running away. So he goes back to Rome, and he says, you can keep all the other girls that escaped, but the girl that led them, she's the one I want, send her back. And the Romans, and he says, do that, otherwise I'll consider the treaty broken. And so the Romans send her back. And so they send her back, and when she explains to Porsena what she did and how she pulled it off, he's nothing but impressed. And he's like, you know what, because Rome sent you back, I can trust that they are actually going to have some good faith in this treaty. And so I'm actually going to let you take half the hostages back with you. And so the hostages decide amongst themselves who they're going to send back, and they decide to basically send back all the women and children. And so it's basically the older men who are going to stay as hostages to Porsena. And so with that, half the hostages get released back to Rome. And Porsena packs up and he leaves. The last thing I want to talk about is the gifts of Porsena. When he leaves, well, maybe we'll leave that for the next slide. Sorry. I just want to keep going. But we're running out of time and the story's getting good. Okay, so sorry, have to cut off in the middle there.
Did you say we couldn't next week?
Yeah, so any questions that we want recorded before we briefly talk? Okay, we'll end it there.